Thank you and good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Council of the District of Squamish, November 20th, 2018. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I am not Mayor Elliott. Some of you may have noticed that. My name is Doug Race, for those at home, Councillor, and I'm the acting mayor this month in the absence of Mayor Elliott, and will be chairing this meeting. So there is an amended agenda, Council, amended to include item 11.1c, which is a regional letter to the regional district that will be spoken to. Is there a mover for adoption of the amended agenda? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Stoner. In favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Are there any notices of motion? There is a delegation request to proclaim BC Aware Days. Is somebody speaking to that? No. Council, it was in your report. Is there a mover for Council to proclaim January 28th to February 5th, 2019 as BC Aware Days in the District of Squamish? Moved by Councillor Pettengill. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Stoner. Councillor Pettengill.
Do we have any policy or direction on when we proclaim things and when we decide not to? Or is it just everyone is individual?
Everyone is individual. Further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Consideration of unscheduled public attendance. That is something that's not on the agenda and cannot wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting. Seeing nothing. Public hearings, there are none, but there are timed items. Item 7, Development Variance Permit No. 138 for 38841 Buckley Avenue.
All right, so good evening, Chair and Council. My name is Carrie Hamilton, and I'm a planner here at the District of Squamish. Presenting to you today Development Variance Permit 138 for property located at 38841 Buckley Avenue. The subject property is located in the Dentville neighborhood. It is the last residential property on the northwest side of Buckley Avenue, before the road turns into Bowen Avenue and Queensway, entering into the business park. The property's irregular shape fronts onto Buckley Avenue.
Excuse me just for a second, sorry. And I should have read something out and I didn't read it out. So let me just interrupt for a second. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested variances. Variance to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw, section 8.6, residential 2, RS2, minimum front setback for principal buildings from 7.62 meters to 6.26 meters. And after I confirm that it is your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address Council. Before we get to that point, we'll go through the staff presentation and Council questions. Thank you.
So the property's irregular shape fronts onto Buckley Avenue. The rear abuts both District Road dedication, which provides vehicle access to the McNamee Place and Crown Land. The property's south interior setback is adjacent to a residential lot. The zoning for the lot and surrounding the lot is RS2 residential. Further west of the lot is a mix of zoning including I-6 rail, RA resource, and P4 ecological reserve zoning. The Local Government Act authorizes a municipality to consider issuance of a development variance permit that varies a provision of a zoning bylaw, provided that the use or density of the land is not being varied. Variance requests in cases where specific site characteristics do not permit compliance with an existing regulation are considered legitimate. Approval of what we call a DVP, Development Variance Permit, under the Local Government Act can only be considered by Council, where Council has discretion to approve or reject the variance request. The owners of 3841 Buckley Avenue, who are here this evening, are seeking council support for a 1.36 meter variance to their front setback from 7.2 meters in the green line here to 6.26 meters in the red line for the purpose of an accessory dwelling unit highlighted in blue on the screen. A front setback is the distance from a building's foundation to the front property line. It is not a provision of density and is a regulation that can be varied by council. Staff are supportive of this variance due to the constraints of an irregular shaped lot and due to the unique precedent that is already set along this particular west side of Buckley Avenue, as both the primary residential dwelling on this lot and the primary residential dwellings on two adjacent lots to the south also do not comply to today's front setback regulation. The front setback of the principal dwelling on the lot is 6.18 meters, making it slightly closer to the front property line than the proposed accessory dwelling unit. So as part of this development variance permit, council presentations staff must also highlight an unfortunate staff error that was made in both the notifications and council report, where the variance reported was 6.62 meters when it should have been published as 6.26 meters, a difference of 0.36 meters. As this is the first official council meeting with our new 2018 council, it is certainly not ideal to be presenting this first file with a staff error. That said, these do happen from time to time, and when they do, any changes to the report are printed on blue paper, which you should have in front of you this evening. The Local Government Act does allow for a variance notification to be general, thus allowing this report change and variance permit to be considered by council this evening. The district's official community plan supports this variance in 4 of the above policies. Accessory dwelling units provide a mix of housing options, support residential infill, are supported in all Squamish neighborhoods, and this particular lot is located on both a core transit route and an existing bike lane for active transportation. District and legislative processes for engagement were followed for this application, including notification to roughly 30 neighbors within a 100-meter radius from the property. It does say on here that no comments have been received, but you did receive a blue sheet just right before council started, which is a letter of support from a neighbor who is across the street from Buckley Avenue for this lot. So staff's recommendation to council is that the District of Squamish authorize the issuance of Development Variance Permit number 138 for the purpose of a front setback variance from 7.62 meters to 6.26 meters. And alternatives to staff's recommendation include the following: that council can send the variance application back to staff, or that council can defeat the recommended motion. Thank you, and open questions.
So I'll go to council first. Council, we'll keep it to questions at this point, and then I'll go to the public, and then you'll have an opportunity to comment. So are there any questions from council? Councilor Sommer.
I noticed that there's a bus stop right out front of the property. Is there any concerns or impact expected with the setback variance?
Through you, Chair, there's no impact to the bus stop. With this application, we've actually identified the drive aisle much better than what it is currently, which will give more room to the bus stop.
Any other questions from council? I'll go to members of the public first. To the proponent, if you're here, an opportunity to speak to this if you wish. You don't have to, but you may. Does the proponent wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Is there any other member of the public that would wish to speak to this application? Seeing none, I'll ask for the second time. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this application? And I'll ask for the third time and final time. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this application? I'll go to council. What is council's wish? Move the recommendation. Councilor French, is there a seconder? Councilor Anderson? Does anybody from council wish to speak to this motion? No. I'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is 7A2. 2, development permit number 460-1002 Enterprise Place. And once again, I'm just before you start, this is a longer thing that I have to speak for this one. Development permit number 460-1002 Enterprise Place. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested variances. Variance to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw. 1, that section 4.27 landscaping subsection 5 irrigation be varied from irrigation shall be provided to irrigation is not required. Number 2, that section 41.7 off-street parking requirements subsection industrial be varied from warehousing or storage use requires 0.9 spaces per 100 square meters of gross floor area. 2, warehousing or storage use requires 5 spaces per 1,322 square meters of gross floor area. Number 3, with section 41.9 bicycle parking requirements subsection quote all other non-residential uses end of quote be varied from 1 class A space per 500 square meters gross floor area and minimum of 6 class B spaces for any development with a gross floor area of 1,000 square meters or greater. 2, 0 class A space per 500 square meters gross floor area and 0 class B spaces for any development with a gross floor area of 1,000 square meters or greater. Number 4 is section 41.11 design criteria. Subsection A, sub 1, surface be varied from be surfaced with a permanent hard surface to be surfaced with a compact gravel surface. Number 5, section 42.4 off-street loading requirements, subsection light industrial be varied from 1 space required for the first 300 square meters to 500 square meters of gross floor area to from 500 square meters to 2,500 square meters gross floor area to vary to 0 space required for the first 300 square meters to 500 square meters of gross floor area, 0 for 500 square meters to 2,500 square meters of gross floor area. As with the previous agenda item, proponent and members of the public will be given an opportunity to be heard or present written submissions requesting that variance. And after I have confirmed that it is your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. Before we go to that, I'll go to staff for presentation, and then there'll be questions from council. Ms. Mazie.
Good evening, Acting Mayor Race and Council. This evening, staff is presenting 1002 Enterprise Place, development permit number 460 for a storage facility. This is a development permit with variances. And my name is Elaine Naseby, and I'm a planner with Community Planning, and this is Jonas Velaniskis, Director. This development permit is, this application is reviewed against our previous official community plan development permit area guidelines. And so the OCP regulates form and character, in this case of industrial development for buildings and landscape through development permit area guidelines. Development permits can include discretionary variances, and those variances are considered individually. So if council does not support one of the variances, if there are multiple, the application as a whole would not be supported. And variances can be approved subject to conditions. 1002 Enterprise Place is at the southern end of our business park. The site is nearly 4,000 square meters or 42,000 square feet. It's zoned I1, light industrial, as are the surrounding lands. It's in the flood hazard area, and it's in development permit area 6. This is an image of the proposed site plan. It shows the layout of the storage units with drive aisles between and a perimeter drive around the outside. And there is a district water main right-of-way that runs along the west side of the parcel. So the proposed development is a storage facility of 165 units. They are flat-packed steel storage containers of various sizes. The units have been reviewed for structural integrity, snow load, and fire safety. Access to the site would be through an electric vertical lift gate with an access code. 5 parking stalls are proposed. The site would be in a gravel surface, and the landscape proposed features drought-tolerant hardy plants, and there is an existing large cottonwood tree that is proposed to remain. So the applicant wishes to transition from open storage to closed storage containers on this parcel. It has been used for outdoor storage for approximately over 20 years. Due to a growing number of new commercial storage facilities and limited supply of industrial lands in the district, in 2017 the district restricted further development of storage facilities by identifying specific legal parcels with storage facilities located on them, allowing those parcels to continue storage facility use. That bylaw number 2511/2016. The application for this proposal was received prior to adoption of that bylaw. So therefore, this application is reviewed according to the previous allowable use of storage on I-1 light industrial. If this development permit is authorized, the storage use will be considered as lawful, non-conforming. So in terms of the development permit area guidelines, DP Area 6, the objectives of this area include providing guidance to ensure that industrial development has minimal impact on environmentally sensitive areas, as well as ensuring that new development is aesthetically attractive. And in higher traffic areas, such as primary roads, there is more emphasis put on the form and character aspect. This particular parcel has a small frontage and resulting limited visibility from the street. It's at the end of a small cul-de-sac. The proposal would improve the street frontage with landscape plantings and a new vehicle gate. The ends of the storage units are proposed to be painted a vibrant yellow color for interest. And on the image on the right there is that existing large boulevard tree that largely screens the development. Development Permit 460 was presented to our advisory design panel in April. And so the applicant has addressed the advisory design panel's comments as follows. They relocated the parking to the perimeter. They identified an accessible stall with compacted gravel. The advisory design panel recommended that that tree on the frontage be retained, additional site lighting be added, and a motion detection sensor on the gate. And so all of those comments were addressed. The advisory design panel supported the project in general and identified that the applicant should work with staff to resolve their recommendations. The application includes 5 variances to the district's zoning bylaw. And so the individual variances are considered minor as storage use creates minimal parking demand. The unpaved lot is currently used for outdoor storage and there is limited landscape. So the parking and loading variances would vary from 12 spaces required to 5 proposed parking. 2 loading spaces would be required to 0 proposed, and bike parking would be required to 0 proposed. And those variances would allow an amount of parking required relative to the storage facility use. So the intent of the zoning bylaw to provide adequate parking is being met. The last 2 variances regarding paving and irrigation, so that the permanent hard surface required for parking stalls would be gravel, and that no irrigation would be required. There are environmental benefits to approving those variances in that the gravel would allow greater permeability and the drought-hardy plants would consume less water. Additionally, approval of those last 2 variances would assist with keeping the site in a temporary state. In terms of public comments, the applicant did provide no objection signatures from 5 surrounding properties regarding the variance. And we have received concerns from storage facility owners in the surrounding area in the business park. And they have expressed concerns around maximum number of buildings, flood construction level requirements. I saw one letter that came in on the weekend, and I just noticed that another has come in. I don't know if you've had a chance to review that, but to my knowledge, we've received 2 letters from storage facility owners. And so public engagement for this development permit is at the consult level on the IAP2 participation spectrum. And so notices were mailed and hand-delivered to all neighbors within 100 meters of the subject parcel. Following circulation of tonight's agenda, last Thursday, Council raised some questions to be discussed at this evening's meeting, so I will address them now. There were 6 questions. The first 4 I will go into greater detail, and the last 2 I will answer here. So the 6 questions, the first related to the form and character component of this proposal. The second was the temporary nature of the proposal. The third, the flood construction level requirement, a requirement for a second door on storage containers. So I'll address all of those in more detail. Whether the variances are considered independently or together, the answer to that is that each variance is considered independently, not as a whole. And the criteria for considering this development permit under the previous OCP, and that is because the bylaws that are in place at the time an application is received are what staff review an application with. So the form and character component of this proposal compared to the rest of the business park, as well as other examples of storage container developments and screening that has been required. For the screening is not required between industrial sites. It is rather required between different uses, particularly when there's residential. But it is required on street frontages to screen chain link fencing. I have got 3 examples of storage facilities in the business park. The first is Black Tusk Storage on Enterprise Way, so this one is in close proximity to the subject application. So this application in 2001 and 2002, development permits 169 and 182 together, authorized construction of 5 mini storage buildings. It is a corner lot, and it is on a more primary street. It is more visible. The application included variances to the zoning bylaw that increased the number of permitted buildings allowed on a parcel from 2 to 5. It varied off-street parking requirements, reducing the number from 21 to 12, and it also varied off-street loading from 2 spaces to 0. So here we see a plan of the 5 buildings. And here we see them in elevation. The building materials consist of ribbed metal roofing and siding. It also included 3 decorative gables on Enterprise Way, and the development was built to flood construction level, so it allows a broad storage use. These are some images of that development. The second storage facility is on Queensway, Garibaldi Storage, and so those are some images of the form and character of that development. The third, as we move up Queensway, is another Black Tusk storage facility, and again, in the images we can see the form and character of those buildings. Another question that Council asked, is there any way to ensure the temporary nature of this proposal? And is a temporary use permit an option to secure that. And so our zoning bylaw defines temporary building as 1 year. These flat-packed storage units have a temporary aspect to them that do allow more permanent development in the future. But there is no maximum timeline with this application. A way to ensure a temporary nature to this proposal would be to register a restrictive covenant on title with a time frame associated with this development, for example, 10 years. And a temporary use permit is not an option because the storage use is allowed. So where is the flood construction level requirement set out? And what are the criteria of dealing with it by covenant as opposed to building to flood construction level? So the requirement is in our floodplain bylaw, and it requires that all habitable areas meet flood construction level. Habitable areas are defined also as storage, and especially any goods damageable by floodwater. So storage containers would need to be raised to flood construction level unless the applicant received a site-specific exemption. In order to receive an exemption to our floodplain bylaw, there are a couple of requirements that in this instance are unlikely to be achieved. The applicant must demonstrate a valid hardship, and the exemption must be consistent with provincial guidelines. But in this case, the guidelines are clear that storage of goods damageable by floodwaters are to be above flood construction level. So the only alternate is to restrict the storage of goods damageable by floodwaters. So in this case, a covenant will be registered on title that prohibits the storage of goods damageable by floodwater. The covenant will require that the applicant makes any renters aware of this, and the applicant has identified that this will be made clear on signage on site as well as in the rental agreement. The question, does the building code require the containers to have a second door that can be opened from the inside? And this came up as a result of some community storage that we had in the, especially the Brendan Park area some years ago. And so there is a distinction here with shipping containers versus these storage units. The definition in our zoning bylaw of a shipping container is a metal transport container with an assigned GVW weight. It is designed for and customarily associated with road, rail, or ocean transport with a maximum dimension. And so your typical shipping container is airtight and watertight, so that if somebody found themselves inside a shipping container, that would be a problem. That's why we do require ventilation to be added to shipping containers. Also, shipping containers have particular doors on them that need special tools or knowledge to open them. And that's why a second man door is required to be inserted into shipping containers. These flat-packed storage containers, they are not airtight, and they have doors that are on hinges as a means of accessing it. So the staff recommendation is long, as Acting Mayor Race read before. I won't go through all of the variances. The recommendation from staff is that council approve the development permit with subject to conditions of landscape bonding, registration of the flood covenant on title that prohibits storage of goods damageable by floodwaters, registration of a boulevard maintenance agreement, and that the development permit include the variances that we've discussed, the 5 variances that are on these slides. And so, if, just to summarize, these are the potential council resolutions tonight. The first would be to authorize the development permit and the variances. The second would be, for instance, if council did not support one or more of the variances, to not authorize the development permit. A third would be to authorize the development permit with conditions. For example, as I mentioned, the variances might be subject to a covenant restricting that storage use to ensure that it is temporary. The fourth would be to refer the development permit back to staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor, are there any questions? Councilor Bennett.
You talked about the possibility for a covenant to ensure a temporary nature, but that wasn't in the recommendations. Can you speak to why or why not?
What? Sorry, through you, Mayor Race, it wasn't in the recommendations in the report?
To register a covenant to ensure this remains a temporary situation.
If I may, for you, Acting Mayor, the reason why we didn't put it in is this file has been with us for over a year now. We've been looking at it, and one of the reasons why we're not recommending that route is that from a compliance perspective, it would require active monitoring on the district's part, and then pursuing compliance with that particular covenant. So administratively, it would be more effort on the district's part. We're sort of relying on the conditions of the site and the nature of development for it to be temporary in nature.
So follow up then. So if we didn't have such a covenant, maybe a two-parter, if we didn't have such a covenant, are staff comfortable with this current form, given the other form and character of the other businesses, similar business on the street, of this current one persisting past 10 years? And then also we are talking about putting a covenant on for FCL rules, which presumably we might have to do some monitoring ourselves too, and so I'm wondering why that would be different.
Yeah, so the flood construction level covenant is not an option. It's either you meet the FCL or that covenant has to go in. There's no discretion on the district's behalf. The floodplain bylaw is pretty clear, and we're not recommending a variation from that. Which also means that the use is going to be limited to storage of goods that are not susceptible to floodwaters, and that sort of further ensures that this is a temporary use. But you're right, that covenant we would have to monitor. Normally, how we operate is we're based on complaints.
Councilor Bennett.
I'd like to know if the proponent has a valid business license.
Through you, Acting Mayor Race, the applicant has made application for a business license and are attempting to legitimize what is there. Currently, their business license is pending approval of this development permit application that is in stream.
Councilor Anderson.
Yes, more or less the same question. It's new information for us this evening via the Buckley storage letter that there has been no business license to operate a storage facility prior to the storage moratorium. Would you have any further comment on?
Through you, Acting Mayor. So yes, the business license application was submitted after the development permit application was submitted. However, there are many businesses in town that might not operate under the business license. That still doesn't prohibit them from the benefits of the legal non-conforming use, as long as they make the development permit application in time before the bylaw change.
Thank you. Let me ask, I gather from the pictures that they're talking about yellow ends and then kind of a gray monotone to the coloring. Are these repurposed shipping containers, or are these built for storage?
Through you, Acting Mayor Race, the applicant has told me that they were created to actually store construction materials on site. I believe they're not from Canada, they're from somewhere else, and so I think their intention is they're made to store these types of things. They're not transported on vehicles. They would be collapsed before they would be transported, so they're not repurposed shipping containers.
And does staff have any comments about the finishing?
They have, through you, Acting Mayor Race, we have, through the course of this application review, arrived at this, these yellow ends as a means of creating interest in this proposal.
And that, if I may add to that, that's the part that's going to be visible from the roadway. The rest of the site is, you're not going to see it. So we are applying a lesser standard in industrial areas that are less visible.
Councillor Soner?
So we're adding 165 units that are not tied down to the floor in any way. They don't have a foundation to them. And they are in a floodway. So is there any risk of, if we did have a substantial flood, we had 165 free shipping containers that all of a sudden start floating down the river?
Through you, Acting Mayor Race, that might be a possibility. The site does have a 6-foot chain link fence around it.
One, that's a good question. We are going to have to look at it through the building permitting process. But the other aspect of it is they are metal containers, so it would be probably hard to float.
Councillor Gill?
If we were to turn this down, I presume the operator could still continue on with the site just without those containers, but storing stuff there, maybe storing stuff on behalf of other people as long as they didn't have containers. But it would still be used for storage, just open.
That's right, outdoor storage, which is what it is used for now.
Anything else from council at this point? Councillor
So I have a quick one. With the potential, the covenant being placed to limit the time frame of the usage, if that was to run its full course and expire, would the rules of the day apply for them to renew that? This is like a hypothetical, of course.
Yes, they would. It would be stipulated in the covenant that it's a 10-year use, and then the applicant would have to agree in order to receive the variances to let that benefit go.
One more. These situations where we have an applicant that's sort of been in stream for a while and regulations have changed, I want to make sure I understand the picture there. Is it a normal time frame that it's been in process, or has there been anything on anyone's account that is still in that process? It feels like it's a bit long.
Acting Mayor Reyes, through you, it has been a long time to process this file. It's not that it's been sort of like staff time, staff capacity, as well as back and forth with requirements. It hasn't been that, for instance, the applicant hasn't been responding or anything like that.
There were a number of issues that we had to resolve in order to make sure that the proposal meets the other zoning provisions. So there's been a lot of back and forth, and it has taken quite a while.
So let me ask, with the restrictive covenant specifying that the contents of the storage containers would be goods that couldn't be damaged by water, that would be up to the district to enforce?
So the applicant would be obligated to follow the provisions of the covenant, such as putting signs up and letting the customers know that they cannot store. If the district received a complaint or decided to monitor the situation, then yeah, it would be up to the district. Usually with these sorts of covenants, there are steep penalties written into the covenant to kind of facilitate voluntary compliance. But at the end of the day, it's always up to the district to monitor.
Councillor
Along the same line of questioning, is this a case where it would be explicitly forbidden, or you do so at your own risk, thus limiting the district's exposure to
I believe it'd be both forbidden and also making sure that there's no liability on the district's behalf if it does happen.
Anything else from council at the moment? So I'll go to the members of the public. First of all, the proponent, he's here. We'll give first opportunity to speak, and after that, any member of the public who wishes to speak to this application. Proponent wish to speak? Can you please go to the podium and just state your name and address, please, and who you're speaking on behalf of.
My name is Paul Reynolds. I live in White Rock, but we are the managers and operators of the site and in joint venture with Mr. Steve Broom. His company is the registered owner of the site and has been operating under a business license. I don't know how that got confused there. There is a business license as a storage business for 22 years on this site.
Correct, since 1996. I don't know how we came upon that there's no business license. There still is today. We've had steel containers there, RVs. I've got a construction company, been in business here for 38 years. We use it for storing pipe, all kinds of hardware that we need. We've had blasting people in there, different types of machinery located all over. So.
And residential customers.
Yeah.
Do you need more information of our identity, or can we speak to the...
Go ahead, speak to the motion.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you to the staff. It has been a very long process, and that's been very frustrating for us, but it's been in good faith, and also part of the extra time was the type of system that we have here is in operation in Saanich, and it was in Whistler, and is currently in Penticton and in Kelowna. And many of these issues were discussed with planning departments in Kelowna and Penticton, and so we directed staff to go and talk, and to contact Penticton. Issues like our containers were up against the fence line on certain sites with the approval of, and that was how it was approved in the development plan. So staff was interested to know what was the thinking of Penticton and Kelowna, etc. on that. In the same way, the fire safety issues of our containers versus shipping containers, we encourage the fire authorities to consult the fire authorities, the fire chiefs in Victoria or Saanich and in Penticton, who have been and looked at this and differentiated these. They're not shipping containers. They're approximately, if you had a 20-foot shipping container and you put our container on weighing scales, they're about 1/4 of the weight. They're much, much lighter, and they are kits that are assembled. They are therefore not suitable to ship goods over a distance on a train or back of a truck. You have to ship them separately and flat pack these units. We have on this, I think there's some numbers that are very, very important to understand the intended temporary use of this storage business. Classically, the appeal of our system is for somebody who has land that is not yet ripe for redevelopment at a higher and better use, but they want to have revenue from the land in the interim period. And one of the ways to look at that is these containers, which are light, have a short shelf life. They typically, brand new, have about a 15-year life, and then you need to assume they are done and no longer fit for use. We have new containers on the site, and we have containers that we brought in from Whistler site when we closed the Whistler site. So we've said to the staff repeatedly from the beginning of our application in early 2017 that we think about 13, 14 years is the maximum that these containers would be at the site. But the intention is, from a land development point of view, is as land values appreciate and there's less and less industrial sites available, then it would make more sense to switch from limited income from storage to redevelopment in a higher, better use with permanent buildings. These are not buildings, in our view. They're not buildings. They are boxes. and they are not on the ground, they are up off the ground, as the photographs might have shown. But the numbers I want to mention is it's a 4,000 square meter site. This is an application to approve the use of 1,300 meters for storage boxes, which is a ratio of only 37%. The permitted coverage ratio on this site is 75%. So we're actually economically underutilizing the site. These, because of all the drive aisles, which are intended and are needed, this is only using 37% of the land. If you think about those numbers, it's fairly clear that at some point in the next few years, a better use of that is a project that would take 75% coverage of the site. When the land price values get to that point, it no longer makes sense to keep. So the economics will drive shutting down this temporary storage use. There can be a restricted covenant on the term, but odds are, if markets are reasonably good in the next few years, it's the economics that will make the site stop being used for storage boxes and be switched to permanent buildings, a bottling plant, a welding operation, some industrial use. Our use is non-permanent, and it's also at the same time environmentally friendly. One of the things that I'd like to add to what the staff have explained to you is that we have created an environmentally sustainable business without any site disturbance or construction of permanent buildings. So no concrete has been brought into the site, no big excavations, no steel has been used, there's no electric underground steel conduits for power supply or security cameras. It is a site that does not impede future redevelopment for a better, higher use in the future. The containers have a useful life of about 13 years left on average, and this allows for full future development. We've designed the business so that with 3 or 4 trucks, we can flat pack back down the containers. We take the fence, the solar lighting that's attached to the buildings, the cameras, the gate motor, all of that will come away on trucks and go to Pemberton or somewhere on the island. We have done this in Whistler. We have done it in one other place in Canada. When we repurpose the site, there is no waste created. This is really interesting. If you have an old self-storage business and it is just drive up, and again, not very good use of the land ratio, when you want to replace it with a modern 2- or 3-story building, you have construction waste of wood, metal, screws, pipes, conduits, lighting, camera lines, cat cables, systems, all of that has to go somewhere. It goes to the dump as building waste. In our site, we have designed it so that we can take it all away on a few trucks and reuse it. So it's a little bit like wilderness camping. Everything that has gone in is going to go out. The only thing that will remain is the concrete pad at the gate to support the vertical lift gate and a pole which has cameras and lights on it. That's very, very unique. And it is, we've done it for economic reasons, but it actually fits as environmentally sustainable at the same time. We were originally operating our sites in Canada from an office in North Vancouver. When we entered into the joint venture arrangement with Mr. Broom, and then we took over the management of the site, this justified us opening our office here in Squamish, so we moved our operations here. We have created 5 positions in Squamish, so unlike a lot of self-storage businesses, although this particular site doesn't have an office with staff, the business, Stop and Store Limited, is here. It's on the same street as Municipal Hall, and our management function and call center are in Squamish. And they are here because we have a self-storage operation here. I think that one other aspect about the flooding issue. It is in a floodplain, just like the Buckley variation that just happened. That house, that new house that, if the variation's approved, it is going to be built. That is also in the same flood zone level that we are. All around us, to the north, to the east, and the west, and across the road, almost all of the businesses that I can think of are direct neighbors and across the road. They have storage containers, shipping containers. They have other things which would be in potential harm's way if there was flooding. So we're not unique. It's a problem that fits for most of Squamish. We accept the need for a covenant. We've accepted the wording. The draft wording has already been given to us. We haven't disputed any part of that. But we also want to just highlight to you that one of the aspects of BC law about flood hazard is that the parts of the building that are sensitive to water, like a furnace, electrical switchboard, ventilation systems, they all have to be built on the building above the flood control level, or what's called the flood construction level. Our site doesn't have electricity in the units. There is no plumbing, there is no ventilation, there is no furnace. So none of those factors are at risk on our site, which is logical given, again, the business model. And finally, SFA Geotechnical, which is a Squamish-based geotechnical firm, did a flood control review report at the request of staff, which has been reviewed by staff, and it states at its final paragraph that the land may be used safely for the use intended. So a professional has signed off, and our understanding of the need to register the flood control plan is his report will be registered as an annex to the covenant of flood control that was referred to in the staff's presentation. So he has put his name to it, and is professionally qualified and intimately knows the Squamish area where his professional practice is based.
I think I have, if there was an issue as far as the licensing goes on that property, I used to have another property in the industrial site as well. And I think in 1996, the business license was put on the wrong property. So we were paying for the business license the whole time. It may not have been on that property, but it was brought to our attention by the district about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was corrected. But we have been paying that business license, not necessarily on that property, by mistake on another property that we had sold previous. So that's probably where the no business license comes in.
Thank you. Does council have any questions arising from that? No? Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this proposal? Please state your name and address and who you are speaking on behalf of.
Okay, my name is April Turner, my husband Paul Turner, and we reside at 1211 Village Greenway. We were the ones that had given a package to each of the council members yesterday as Black Tusk Storage. We've been in business in Squamish for 17 years, and with these variances that are now with the new storage, containers, it's just, you know, to the levels in the last 17 years to where the district or the industrial park has gone from industrial to business. With these variances and stating that if he doesn't have to go to the flood level, then he's not to have anything stored within anybody's possessions of their home, all their home belongings or whatever. Who's going to monitor that? Is the district going to monitor that? I know for a fact that they are storing people's belongings, whether they're traveling for a year or two, or they've got, you know, renting and got everything that they own in those storage lockers. So, you know, if they do get storage insurance on the possessions, there's no way if there is a flood that any insurance company is going to pay for that, knowing that they weren't within the floodplain level. I just feel that, you know, this is something that, you know, if it's only 13 years and it's classified as a temporary, then we as owners and our business sit and watch another business deteriorate over the next 13 to 15 years. And I think there's a need for storage in Squamish as we grow, but there also is a new construction with over 100,000 square feet that's just about ready to open within the next month or two at the max, that has got a huge state-of-the-art. So, and it's also, we've had storage, so it's not that there wasn't any storage for anybody to store anything. And I know ourselves, I don't want to get off track because I know we're on this variance, but I phoned in 3 years or 2.5 years ago on wanting to add extra storage to our facilities on the perimeter of smaller storage containers. And I phoned the district on the planning department and had asked about these containers, because I see them here popping up on different properties. And I was told, no, under no circumstances, this was not something that the district wanted. They were trying to get people to actually get them off the properties, and they didn't want them added. So we do have a boat RV above ground storage, but it's not on a floodplain. So, and we get people all the time asking us, wanting to put containers on it. And because we've been told no, we won't allow them. We just had one yesterday morning, actually, and he's got one coming from overseas, and we've had to tell him, we're sorry, but this is something we've been told that we are not to have on site, personally, and so we can't accommodate them. And now we've got a whole facility coming, and this is how he's gonna set up business. I just have a hard time with that, knowing what we went through with all our permits and the addition to the cost to the floodplain level. But we take pride and ownership of this is something that the business park has turned into. Yeah, so anyway, we're just want to finish here with, with these variances, if they're passed with the metal containers, it will become permanent, and we will have to watch this deteriorate over time. I thank you for your time.
And I would just like to add that if you guys are considering approving it, you can drive by the site, it's already up and running. What you see is what you get, and it's not very appealing.
And also, you're opening it up to everybody. We do have more room, so do I just start saying yay to everybody and you have to come park it? I mean, if we've got a full facility there happening, how are you going to tell other people with empty lots that they can't be doing the same, especially if we already have a business in storage? So, hey, if that's what you want is containers, then we'll go forward with that as opposed to building, because it's sure a lot cheaper.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to this application? Please state your name and address and who you might be speaking for.
Gary McKay, 762 Rick Crescent in North Vancouver. And similarly, we're Garibaldi Storage. So we have a couple of facilities, two within a few hundred meters of this. And I was just to get the emails, we were in the similar timelines talking about when we actually had storage containers, we got rid of it. We were told that the municipality didn't want them, and also we would rather build actual buildings, but we're told that that wasn't going to happen because the bylaws coming through and changing, and we actually, I think at one point even had a delegated permit in, but they'd only allow us a small percentage of it to be storage. The rest had to be warehouse and such. So I think we sold 2 properties on Queenswood because of that, and I mean this is all in the same timeline. So should we just have gone and put up containers like that? We've looked at those containers before too. In fact, we looked at a site that has them up in Pemberton, and they are what they are. Anyways, it's a bit frustrating because our group would rather just build a proper building, a proper storage facility. I mean, that's what we do on our property. And we're quite well known for trying to do that sort of thing. And we took ours and fixed them up as well as we could. We also, I think we have a building, 115 Industrial Way, excuse me, that we would like to make out of a storage facility, but have been told no. Well, and I understand the bylaw has changed, but we certainly could have made those same moves and be possibly in a similar situation. So it seems a bit curious to be seeing this one come forward.
Thank you. And I could just go to staff on that point. Is this storage, are the storage containers on site?
Acting Mayor Race, did you just ask, are they on site?
Yes.
Yes. Not all of them, but there are quite a few.
Are there any other people that wish to make presentations on this proposal? I'll ask for a second time. Are there any further submissions? And I'll ask for a third and final time. Are there any further submissions on this? Thank you. Does council have any further questions? Councilor Pettengill.
Just with some of the comments, I'm wondering if staff could comment on what our communications have been sort of before and after, and with respect to our bylaw changes around storage units.
Acting Mayor Race, through you. Yes, so in my recollection, I was actually the one that was processing the Daegu application, and it was a delegated development permit. There was a smaller number of storage containers. I don't recall the number of them. And so the application that they had prior to the storage bylaw, we said that they could go forward with that amount of storage, which is what Mr. McKay referred to, that they would be allowed to have that certain amount of storage use moving forward, because that's what their application had, but that the rest would have to be a different use. Whereas the 1002 enterprise application that was received prior to the storage bylaw had these containers on the whole site, so we reviewed them according to what their application consisted of.
If I may add to that, there's been other comments about other properties, and it's very property specific, the development proposals we deal with. Often there's existing uses, and that takes up a certain amount of density, site coverage, number of buildings up, and that restricts the site. Well, in this case, the whole site is proposed kind of as, without any pre-existing uses, as simply a storage use. They meet the number of buildings. I think that might have been an issue on another application. These storage containers, they are considered buildings under our bylaw. So this application had to group them up and join the containers together in order to ensure that they're not exceeding the amount of buildings. So there's a lot of constraints, and those constraints get even tighter on sites that have existing uses.
Any further questions from council? I'll go back to the public. Is there anybody that would? Oh, go ahead, Councilor.
There's been some talk of what appears to be current non-conformity, and I wonder to what extent should we consider that, and if we consider it in any form of our decision on this topic. Sort of a forgiveness, not permission thing.
The fact that there is already some non-conformity happening? Yeah, I mean, these are variance requests, so they're 100% subject to council's discretion. We're looking at it as a proposal. If this proposal does not work out, does not get approved, and the application is not realized, then we have to deal with the non-conformity part of the site.
Acting Mayor Rice, I just want to clarify, I think the question also was, does the fact that there's non-conforming use currently affect the decision on the DP with variances? And I believe that, strictly speaking, from a procedural point of view, it doesn't, but that this would get them into compliance.
Councilor Schilling.
Just a clarification on the business permit that is currently active on the site, is that specifically for storage?
Acting Mayor Race, through you, there is a discrepancy with what I thought I knew and what the applicant is saying. So without having our business license staff here to confirm that, I'm unable to confirm that. I know that the previous business license use was for outdoor storage, which is what the site has been used for a long time, storing vehicles, equipment, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Anything further from council? I'll go back into the public. Is there anybody that wishes to make any presentation on this application? And for a second time, is there anybody that wishes to make a presentation on this application? And for the third time, is there anybody that wishes to make an presentation on this application? Seeing none, council, what is your pleasure?
I'll move the motion.
Staff recommendation. And just, Mr. Velanishkas, for clarification, do you want us to deal with all of the variances separately or as one motion?
So you could deal with all of it together by putting the motion forward of staff recommendation, which includes all the variances, and then I think if that motion doesn't pass, then you could look at all the variances individually.
No, that's
No.
not
No.
it.
I think
No.
it comes as
It's the other way.
one, because if we have a variance that isn't approved, what do we have? We don't know.
So it's all or nothing?
I
One
believe
motion
so.
for everything?
If I can clarify, Elaine laid out 4 options essentially for moving forward, and one of them was to refer the application back to staff if council didn't agree with some of the variances, however, didn't want to defeat the application altogether. So I think in that case, we would discuss the variances individually.
Are you seconding? Well, the motion's on the table. Is there a seconder? I'll second it for discussion. Go ahead, Councilor.
I certainly sense some frustration on the part of everybody involved in this. We've got a business that has been non-conforming, wishes to come in to being in conforming. And one of my frustrations is I'm disappointed to hear that from my understanding that Stop and Store doesn't have a business license despite having a head office operation here in Squamish for some time. Despite those frustrations and those concerns, I'll support bringing this operation into conformity.
Anybody further? Any other members of council? Councilor Henderson.
Yes, I like the system flexibility for this site, the system that is of the container units, the specific types here. I view the opportunity to readily repurpose the site, to quote the staff report that there may be better prospects for alternative industrial uses in future. I view that as positive. We have a scarce resource of industrial lands. There's a number of factors involved. It's not a simple picture. The picture in the business park is an evolving one, and that is a clumsy set of circumstances. It comes with concerns and frustrations and uncertainties for many parties. The letters we've received and the staff report refer to this evolving picture. We also have the prospects in a new year of a zoning bylaw review for industrial lands. It's been overdue for some time. I'm going to be supporting these variances, but I would also like to encourage support that we have a robust discussion of industrial zoning, particularly in the business park in the new year, and that we have the participation of all of the stakeholders that we've heard from this evening.
Councilor Herbert.
There's a few pieces of this I'm not 100% comfortable with. I feel that the floodplain level and the restriction on what is stored there, that falling to the district, and the matter of if they're stored inside containers, we don't know what's in there. So this rule seems to be something that we are going to put in place. We're going to be charged with enforcing, and I don't think there's a mechanism to do that. And I'm not comfortable with that aspect of it. And similar with the time frame, allowing the the temporary use being sort of decided by the market, if you will. I'm not comfortable with this on this current state at this point.
Any other members of council wish to speak? Well, I'll speak then. And I'm having difficulty with this. I've gone back and forth in my mind with this, and I can see some advantages to the proponent with the temporary, environmentally friendly system, and I can understand that. I don't take issue with the fact that they're already doing it. I'm sort of concerned with where we go from here on. They're not storage containers or shipping containers, I beg your pardon, as we see going on trucks back and forth with North Shipping and all the rest of it on it. They are something that is more purpose-oriented. I still have concerns. I have concerns just generally with the form and character. And I looked up the old OCP, and it talks about monotonous roof lines and flat roof lines and so forth. And you compare it to the other storage units, with one exception, or storage businesses, and they have gone out of their way to make their sites more attractive. And I take the point that they're in higher profile areas, but nevertheless, I think what's good for one is good for the other. And personally, I would like to see, generally the standard of buildings in the business park as they become permanent be raised. I could go with this on a relatively short fuse. If this is indeed a temporary program, I could consider a 3-year covenant or something like that to allow this business to be there, planning for a permanent building to be built. But the idea of this being there even for 10 years for me is not acceptable. So depending on where this particular motion goes, that might be the next alternative. But at the moment, I'm not going to support this. I don't like this in a permanent or semi-permanent way. I had difficulty with some of the variances, I will say, particularly around parking. And I take staff's point, it's a storage unit, that it's, people often just park in front of their units. But this is on a cul-de-sac where there typically is not parking. The other ones are on straight streets where you can park in the street for overflow parking and so forth. So I would have difficulty with the parking variance. I would not support that variance. The loading zone variance I don't have a problem with, and the other variances I don't have a problem with, but that particular variance I do have a problem with. So at the end of the day, I will not be supporting this motion. If anybody further wishes to speak? No? I'll call the question then. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Herford, Councillor Pettengill, Councillor Stoner, and myself. Motion is defeated. Does that leave staff with any options?
The permit is defeated.
The permit's defeated.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay. So it'll be up to the proponent to go back to staff to go forward in some other form.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 8A1, bylaws, first 3 readings, District of Squamish Housing Agreement Bylaw, DP 471, 1870 Dowd Drive, number 2528, 2018.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Race. So this is a bylaw. Sorry, I thought it was a different proposal. I'll let Elena speak about this.
Acting Mayor Race and Council, hello. So yes, this item is a housing agreement bylaw. This is for 1870 Dowd Drive. And this development permit with variances was approved in September with the previous council. And one of the subject to conditions is entering into a housing agreement. The housing agreement is for 2 affordable rental housing units. So the location is at the end of Candleless Road, where there's the new turn off the highway onto Darwood Drive. So the subject site is zoned C1, local commercial. So yeah, September 18th was when council authorized development permit number 471. The mixed-use commercial and residential building has a considerable amount of commercial space at grade, 14,000 square feet. It also has 37 residential apartment units above, ranging in size from 1 to 3 bedrooms. So it does total 4 stories in height with an additional story of underground parking. The development permit with variances, so a discretionary height variance was granted through the development permit with variance process. That raised the building from 10.68 meters to 15.78. So this is just a bit of background that typically a housing agreement would be negotiated through a rezoning process, but in this case it was a development permit that had discretionary variances. Since affordable housing is considered a community amenity contribution with rezoning applications, staff and the applicant negotiated that 2 units be secured as affordable housing rental units in consideration of the height variance. So housing agreements, the Local Government Act grants authority for local governments to enter into housing agreements with landowners. They can regulate the tenure, the eligibility, administration, rent, sale prices for the units. They must be entered into by bylaw. And the district is currently developing a method in which housing units may be secured and managed. So the proposed affordable housing units for Darwood Drive would be managed by the applicant. Therefore, they will not be managed under an upcoming affordable housing management program. So the units are 2-bedroom units designated on the 2nd and 3rd stories. They're both of over 1,000 square feet in size. The units would be provided to tenants earning low to moderate income. So the income must meet the housing income limit requirements from BC Housing. For Squamish, that would mean currently households with a maximum annual income of $52,000 would qualify for tenancy in a 2-bedroom unit. So the maximum original rent is $1,300 for each 2-bedroom unit, and the rent amount can be increased yearly following the Consumer Price Index for Canada. And the applicant is required to provide the district a declaration that the terms are being followed on a yearly basis. These are those 2 units on the 2nd and 3rd floors. So district policy related to affordable rental housing. This does align with the official community plan policy. So the affordable housing objectives as well as policies to increase the supply, availability and access to affordable housing, manage and preserve these units in perpetuity, prioritize affordable housing as a top priority for CACs, and utilize density bonusing or other incentives to encourage provision of on-site affordable and rental housing. Council priority areas from our previous council. So economic development, the housing agreement provides 2 rental units that contribute to affordable housing options available for employees in the community. Healthy community, so the housing spectrum supports all the needs of citizens. And in terms of public engagement, there was no public engagement on the housing agreement item, and none is proposed. So the recommendation is that council approve the following resolution, that the District of Squamish give the first 3 readings to the housing agreement bylaw. Thank you.
So let me ask, it states that the owner will be managing these units because we don't have a housing authority in place today. but we are proceeding in that direction. Is there any thought to taking over the management at some point in the future once we do have a housing authority? And if so, I didn't see anything to that effect in the housing agreement. It would be something to add to the agreement that they could transfer management to us. So I'll go to staff with that.
Thank you. So when we negotiated this housing agreement, we currently have no policy on that. And I believe Mr. Buxton is working on a policy that will produce a standard housing agreement with the consideration for who's managing those units. So what's happening at this point with larger developments, we're trying to delay the housing agreements till a later date. In this case, that's no longer possible because the development is proceeding to the DP stage. It's gone through that process. And so at no point we've had any discussions with the applicants that they would be managed by an authority that doesn't currently exist.
Any questions of council? Any other questions? Councilor Pettengill, Councilor Soner.
Just regardless of the who's managing, is there an impact in terms of equity and assets? So if this was eventually transferred to a district-owned or district partnership of a housing authority, would we then have additional equity or asset in theory?
No, the units were always intended to be privately owned. The question is who's managing them. And in this case, it would be district monitoring the units. So every year there would be a declaration to the district of, confirmation that the occupants are eligible and that the rents are in accordance with the agreement.
Councilor Soner.
I'm just curious how the maximum original rent was determined and if that was something that was previously negotiated.
Acting Mayor Reyes, through you, it was the Hills, the housing income limits, 52,000, and I believe it's 30% of that divided by 12 months.
Any further questions? There's a recommendation, council. Is anybody prepared to move that? Councilor Pettengill, second Councilor Soner. Further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is item 8B for adoption, District of Squamish Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw. And this is for adoption. If you recall, we had the first 3 readings last week. I'll move it. Is there anybody prepared to second? Second by Councilor Stoner. Is there any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. And staff reports, corporate services, local election results. Ms. Arthurs.
Thank you, Mayor Reyes. I'm Robin Arthurs, General Manager, Corporate Services, Corporate Officer, and Chief Election Officer for the district. This report is on the 2018 general local election results, and it's a statutory requirement for information only. The report outlines the results of the election and also indicates the voter turnout that we had this time around. No fancy presentation, but I do have a couple of highlights. 2018 saw a very slight increase in voter turnout at 47.8%, which was up from 47.13% in 2014. However, we still processed 1,000 more voters than 2014. So that's significant for us when we're talking about 7,000 ballots cast this time and about 1,000 less in 2014. So 2018 was the first time that the district utilized the mail-in ballot process, and we weren't quite sure, having not gone through it before, what to expect, but we had 30 ballots go out and 22 ballots that were cast returned. So that we figure that's pretty successful, especially in light of what was happening with Canada Post at the time and some challenges that voters might have had returning their ballots in time. Out of that, 32 ballots actually were returned to us unopened, and because the voters ended up being in town and they voted a different way. So they were those numbers are accounted for in our ballot accounting. An important thing, I think, I don't know what the reasoning is, but we only had 53 spoiled ballots this time. And in 2014, we had 84. And it's important to recognize with the use of voting machines that spoiled ballots, that's 53 people who were able to cast a ballot versus a manual counting system where those ballots would be rejected and would not be counted in the overall count. So it's really important using those voting machines because at the time that they're putting it in the machine, it kicks it back, and it pretty much every one is because it's an overvote. Somebody's done something, voted for 7 or 8. We did have an unofficial recount because there was only a 2-vote difference between number 6 and number 7 on our council race. And after a very lengthy process of recasting all of the ballots, the results were determined to be identical at the end of it, which was really reassuring as far as the integrity of the voting machines goes. So that was nice, like from a process standpoint. Our venues this time, they were very busy. We moved out of the library for advanced voting because it was deemed to be too small last time we went to the 55. And again, it was so busy for advanced voting. We had a huge voter turnout at advanced voting, which was excellent. Now that you don't need a reason to advance vote, we encourage it. And we're going to be looking at our venues again for the 2022 election as far as adequacy and size and the number of advanced voting goes. Also, what we'll be looking for in 2022 is we'll be exploring options to lessen the impact of elections and what it takes to put on an election on the day-to-day operations in corporate services, but specifically within legislative services, because we found this time we were really resource constrained. So we'll be putting together information down the road so that we can budget appropriately for additional resources. It was probably a month of 14 and 16-hour days for Shirley and I. It was really intense because there's a lot of work that goes into both operations, and running an election is exciting, and it's one of the things that we both of us love about our jobs. But it's hard to do 2 things at once and put a lot of focus into it. And it starts in January for legislative services, the putting on the election. So we'll be coming back with a plan of how we can do it all and do it better and not get burnt out doing it. So if there's any questions.
And just the reason I was kind of frowning, I was trying to do the math in my head. We had 1,000 more ballots and roughly the same percentage. Does that mean that there were 2,000 more eligible voters this year compared to 4 years ago?
That's right. Yeah, there's 12,700 and something, and then this time after new registration, there was 14,696.
Oh. Go ahead, Dr. Sherman.
Just a quick question. On general voting day, all the spoiled ballots went through one table. Is that just a matter of procedure?
That's right. So it's, you have a different book and a different accounting system, and it's easier for us to keep it at one table. So the election official walks over to the table that does the spoiled ballots, and we issue to keep all the books and the signing and everything in one location. And it streamlines the process for the other tables so that they're not having to deal with them.
Councillor French and Councillor Fenton.
I acknowledge the excellent work of staff on the election. I found it to be professionally run, as is usually the case with the elections in Squamish. And I also acknowledge there's a large team that comes together to make the elections happen, and I thought the entire team did a great job.
And I also, to add to that, it takes all the department's support when we're doing this. there's a lot of support. It's a definite corporate effort to put on an election.
Councilor Bettman?
So I'd also like to specifically thank staff. I was the beneficiary of those 2 extra votes. But I got to observe the recount all day, and I know staff were exhausted, and really appreciate the diligence that people showed all day, the professionalism, and it was the Monday too, actually getting ready. But also my counterpart who wasn't successful in the election. I think it was a really stressful day for everyone, and the way he handled it was very professional and very much appreciated as well.
Anybody else? So you're looking for a motion to receive?
Oh, yes, there is a motion.
Yep. So there's recommended motion. Councilor French, Councilor Saunders seconds. Further comment? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And 9B1, Community Resiliency Investment Program Grant. Welcome. All right, and there is an addition, Council, additional documentation that came to you. This is one of the blue sheets on this particular topic. It is the updated report. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. Noted on Chief Stoner. I'm pursuing a provincial grant which supports the district initiative, and as you said, it's a Community Resilient Investment Program grant. This grant ties into our Community Wildfire Protection Program, which was completed earlier this year. That program put together 48 recommendations. This grant is for $100,000, which will allow us to deal with many of those high priority recommendations. If we're successful and we receive this $100,000, we're going to look at 3 paths for the funding. The first are fire smart activities, which is really public education initiatives. Some of those would be work with representatives of Squamish neighborhoods to develop local area risk reduction programs, continue with our community chipper program that we did last year, or to enact a wildfire community preparedness day, which is again a public education initiative. Another initiative that we'll be looking at would be to enact a wildland interface development permit area. Essentially, if someone's building on the edge of the forest or the interface area, we'd be looking for some fire smart activities, minimum setbacks from the forest, non-combustible roofing, that type of thing. The grant funds, 30% will be used for the wildland interface development permit area and the fire smart activities. Most of it going to the permit areas. We bring on a consultant to do much of that work. The last 70% will be for fuel management, and that's where there's a slight difference between what you originally received and the update. The fuel management work for this year would be going to doing everything that we have to do, all the preparation required to do fuel treatments in 2020. And so that's all the planning required, the permitting, the reaching out to community shareholders or stakeholders in that area. We would go ahead for the same grant again next year to do the actual fuel treatment for those areas. Basically, that's the program at a very high level. It's a $100,000 grant. We were looking for a recommendation that the District of Squamish support the proposed use of Community Resilient Investment Program grant, and the District of Squamish accept overall community grant and related programs.
Thank you.
Take questions.
And it's more of a comment. Members of council went on a tour, part of our orientation yesterday, and one of the stops was the fire hall, and we went toured through by the fire staff. And we came across this trailer that I frankly had forgotten we had, which has the ability to be set up in front of a row of houses that are threatened by a wildfire and sprinkler 15 of them at the same time to fend off these fires, which quite fascinated me. And so when you're talking in the report about, it occurred to me when I was reading the report about enact a wildfire community preparedness day, that'd be a neat thing to demonstrate. And be sure you ask the homeowner before you turn on the tap. But even if you didn't go through a line of houses, and even if you didn't use 15, just instead of half a dozen or something, just as a matter of a demonstration, might be quite interesting to the community.
Thank you, Ed. That's a great idea. We were looking at certainly utilizing it in the community wildfire day. Might want to avoid houses if we can in case we get water in the wrong place. It's less forgiving when there's not a fire approaching someone's house, but we certainly do want to show it in that day, by all means.
Any other staff comments or council comments? No? Somebody prepared to move the staff recommendation? Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Herford. Further comment?
Has council seen the District of Squamish Community Wildfire Protection Plan 2017 update? Has that been reviewed by council previously?
Yeah, it was reviewed by council and it was accepted by council, yes.
And that was, I think it was just a few months ago, if I recall. Councillor Anderson.
I note that in the November 15th update to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, there is reference to the airport as one of the higher priority areas for in the treatment area, proposed treatment areas. I'm just wondering, as a general comment, there are potential development proposals in that vicinity over the next few years. That as a matter of course, opportunities for synergies and cost savings for the municipality will be considered as you put together the plans for these treatment areas.
And that's a great idea, and that's certainly why a robust planning process will take place next year as part of this journey. Yes.
Councillor Stoner.
I'd just like to say that I'm really thankful for staff for having put this together and that we do have a community wildfire prevention program in place, and excited that we're doing a little bit more outreach and education on it, especially with the increasing tourism. So excited to see this go forward.
Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Next is, the number right? 9D2, UBCM CEPF grant application evacuation route planning.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Megan Latimer. I'm the Emergency Program Coordinator with the District of Squamish. And tonight we're seeking council endorsement for an application that we're putting forward to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for a traffic management plan. And this is part of a new funding stream that UBCM has put forward for evacuation route planning. The traffic management plan that we're looking to develop would actually be an annex to the Sea to Sky multimodal evacuation plan that we've been working on for the last year with the resort municipality of Whistler as our partner. This evacuation plan basically outlines all of the processes, actions, roles, and responsibilities of all agencies at both the local level as well as provincial and federal level that would be involved in an evacuation process within one of our communities. So the traffic management plan is sort of like the next phase in this, and would actually be looking at how we would set up the highway for a mass evacuation from Squamish north. And then Whistler is putting an application for mass evacuation from Whistler south to Squamish. So they'll be putting an identical application to ours for the funding. So it's for $25,000. This would be to hire a consultant to look at how this would be set up for us. We'll be working closely with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure as well as other partners like the Ministry of Public Safety and RCMP in terms of how this would actually be set up. So we're looking for a recommendation that council approve the resolution that we can put forward our application to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for this.
Any questions, council? Are we prepared to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Anderson. Further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That was something that came out of some of the experiences in the interior a couple of years ago. Staff got on it. Next is item 9C1, Affordable Housing Organizational Evaluation. Mr. Buxton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. Tonight, Gary Buxton, General Manager here, responsible for the housing portfolio for the time being. I have with me Katie Ferris and Devin Cronshaw from Macola Development Services are actually authored the evaluation report that's in front of council for consideration tonight. Do a brief introduction and then we'll get going into the substance of the report. But our objective tonight is to advance discussion on and get some additional direction with respect to the housing organisation for the community. So with that, I will let Katie and Devon lead you through the report.
Great, thank you for having us tonight. Tonight we're going to provide an overview on our role for Macola Development Services in this project, provide an overview of the purpose of the Squamish Housing Organization, the methods used to provide the evaluation that we'll present to you, recommendations, and some next steps. So just briefly, Macola Development Services is a nonprofit housing development consulting firm who specializes in planning and research, community engagement, and development consulting for affordable housing projects in British Columbia. We work with First Nations, nonprofits, and governments to advance affordable housing goals. We've been working with the District of Squamish since 2016 on an affordable housing policy and program.
So the work we've completed to date has included the development of a policy and operational options analysis and final report, which was accepted by Council in March 2018. This identified 3 pillars of the District of Squamish Affordable Housing Program. So first, the comprehensive affordable housing pillar, which is the component of the program which incentivizes and encourages the creation of affordable housing in the district. Number 2 is the perpetually affordable housing pillar, which ensures that district-controlled housing remains affordable in perpetuity. And finally, the Squamish Housing Organization, which is what we've come here to discuss in more detail today. So the purpose of the Squamish Housing Organization is to provide housing solutions that directly support low to moderate income households within the district and assist indirectly in the provision of core housing needs solutions. In order to determine the most appropriate and effective option for the district to structure this organization, a comprehensive evaluation was undertaken. So the evaluation report examined 4 organizational options for the Squamish Housing Organization, each of which was identified in previous work completed as potential successful models in the province. The final one there, the in-house option, was used as a control case, which the other 3 options were compared against. To ensure that the district is able to make an informed decision, these models were then evaluated based on 16 criteria, which were developed collaboratively with the district's leadership team. These criteria were derived from 4 key themes. First, governance and organizational structure. Second, legal and tax implications. Third, financial implications. And finally, the implementation and rollout. Using these criteria, each model was scored based on a pre-identified objective, which was determined directly by district leadership team. This resulted in both weighted and unweighted scores for each model. The weights were assigned based on district priority, which again were determined by district leadership.
So based on the information that was evaluated, a blended approach to an organizational model is what's recommended. The recommended approach is to utilize a partnering agreement with an existing nonprofit housing provider in the short term and transition to a district-owned housing corporation in the future. The approach would provide advantages to the district in both the short and long term, which best align with the goals that were identified. A partnering agreement under the community charter would allow the district to partner with an existing housing provider in Squamish to provide housing operations services to district-owned units. This model can be quickly implemented, provides low financial risk to the district while not duplicating existing community resources. Further, this model relieves the district of operational administration while allowing the district to establish the operational expectations for these units with an experienced operator of affordable housing. The housing corporation model is proposed for the long-term option for the district. This option received a higher weighted score than developing a new nonprofit society based on its ability to reinvest profits in housing, provide the district with greater control and access to financing and funding. And finally, this model has been successfully implemented in the region and by municipalities across BC. So just bringing it back to how it all fits together, the Squamish Housing Organization is an important component of the affordable housing program and acts as the mechanism for the comprehensive and perpetually affordable housing policies and units to be carried out through.
Our next steps in the affordable housing program framework are to develop and build out the comprehensive and perpetually affordable housing components of the program, and these policies will be considered in alignment with the Squamish Housing Organization as their direction will have impacts on each other. This work will be carried out through the winter of 2019.
Back to some of the more mundane elements of the project. The funds for this work have come out of the 2017 and 2018 operational budget in the CAO division. Under contracted services, we're well on budget for 2018. The budget this year was 70,000 of new money and 40,000 carried from the previous year. In 2019, we're looking for 30,000 in new funding under contracted services, plus we'll carry the remainder from this year for a total of 75 to 85,000 for the work next year, which will more than likely be more than adequate. As an aside, all of the Buckley Avenue expenses to date and those that come in the future with the recent announcement, they've all come from the BC Housing funding, whether it's through the, actually that's the Community Partnership Initiative with the initial 145,000 funding, and seed funding from CMHC got us to this point, and with the recent announcement we'll be using those funds to get us to break ground on the Buckley project. In terms of organisational implications, the affordable housing portfolio is a new service area for us, and it has had significant impacts in terms of staff time, particularly at the core leadership team level. The implications going forward are not exactly clear at this point in time. They're going to be largely determined by the organisational decisions that we make. The in-house function obviously would have a much bigger impact than the municipal corporation. The operating agreement as proposed in the short term, we can certainly manage that with existing resources. The cost of that, again, is not entirely clear at this point, but this decision is not making any financial commitment on behalf of the district. That operating agreement is going to be coming back to council for ratification, so there's another decision point. In terms of implementation, where to from here? We'll commence the process of sourcing an operating entity, initially to manage and operate the Buckley Avenue project. That's driven by timeline. We need to have that in place very quickly. There may be a separate partnership agreement with the same operating entity. It may be the same agreement to deal with any affordable housing units that we accrue through housing agreements. Now, we saw those two earlier on in the agenda, either through developer contributions, amenity contributions. Those units may fall under the auspices of an operating agreement. They may not. The developer's going to make those decisions. The corporation options in sort of the intermediate term, we could proceed independently and set up our own corporation. We could set up a corporation collaboratively with it in conjunction with a non-profit. There's some merit to doing that. Or a blended approach in assigning that partnering agreement to a non-profit corporation. I'm not fixed on any of those solutions because all of those meet the objective of having someone outside of the organisation with some expertise in housing perform the housing function. So it's all corporately driven. That's the strategic direction, but we're not fixed on a particular solution at this point. So the recommendation is that we accept the report, the evaluation report that's before you, and that staff are directed to pursue a partnering agreement for the Buckley project and any affordable housing units that we receive through third parties. So I think we are at questions from council.
Council, any questions? Councilor Henderson.
Can you identify some other municipal jurisdictions that you have looked at, you have referenced in the report that you have benchmarked with other municipalities, but they're not named? We are, of course, familiar with the Worcester experience, but which other communities are you looking at and should we be looking at ongoing?
Yeah, so Council Chair, in the previous report, and this was the organizational report, actually previous to the final report that was adopted in March 2018, I think it was between 8 and 10 different sort of examples and were looked at. So from an in-house perspective, we did look at, I think Richmond was one of the big benchmarks, and then from a housing authority or corporation, you're at the Whistler Housing Authority was one of the main ones looked at. And then from a nonprofit perspective, in-house Whole Housing Society has done some work with the city of Courtney, and that was one of the main organizational examples that we looked at from that. So.
Thank you.
We went further with Medicine Hat, which is another one in Alberta. That was a
nonprofit society. Yeah. Yep. Partnering agreement. Correct. Yep.
Capital Regional Housing Corporation to some extent too was another one we looked at.
And then Burnaby was another one from the in-house function.
And I'm familiar with Canmore as a corporation as well.
Any other questions? Councillor Stoner, Councillor Perry?
What level of confidence that we have that there is existing capacity within the current nonprofit societies to take up this partnering agreement?
I mean, we've been in regular communication with all of the nonprofit operators in the community, and they've expressed varying degrees of interest and capability. The real answer to that is the request for expression of interest, which closes on Friday. That will give us a clear example of who's interested and capable. So we'll have that by noon on Friday, the answer to that by noon on Friday.
Councillor Perry, do you have your hand?
Yeah, you may have sort of answered my one question. I was going to ask, do we have a sense of how close we are to being able to find a good partner? I can't remember my other question, so I'll leave it at that.
I mean, partnering agreements they're probably fairly standard and fairly easy to.
Yeah, BC Housing uses partnering agreements when they partner with nonprofits on units that they own, so it would likely take a similar shape to that. And there are a number of nonprofits in the community who have experience with those types of partnerships with BC Housing.
And yeah, under the community charter, it is quite regularly exercised, isn't it, for local governments.
Must have jogged Councillor Brittenell's mind, so take it away.
Thank you. So yeah, my other question, with some of these partnerships, whatever form it takes, we're talking about a fair bit of assets, equity. Once we start going down a road, how easy is it to change our mind in general? In terms of, well, we don't want to be in a partnership anymore. We want to go to all our own.
Well, by their very nature, they are long-term. They are life of building. So they're not incredibly easy to change. What we will want to include in the partnering agreement are assignment provisions, so that when we move to whatever corporate decision that we make, that partnering agreement can be assigned, if that's where we end up, through whatever corporate entity emerges from. I should note also, we're actually in a partnering agreement right now with the Squamish Helping Hand Society, so we've got a fair amount of familiarity with where we're going to go with that sort of documentation.
And that was my question actually, was you start off with a nonprofit and then we transition to a corporation. What is the trigger point for that? What is the threshold to go to a corporation?
One of the key items that we looked at was critical mass, so looking at sort of the organization's ability to take on and make a financially sustainable decision around the number of units, so moving from partnering to a district option.
Yeah, so the threshold we looked at in the report states at least 100 units or more to make it sort of that scales of economy that makes sense. So that's what was identified by the state.
If if we combine those resources with somebody else, we automatically hit that threshold very quickly. So again, that collaborative approach gets us there a lot quicker if we're able to do that.
Any other questions, Council? There's a staff recommendation that the district accept the McCullough Development Services Squamish Housing Organizational Report, and the district staff pursue a partnering agreement or agreements with an operating entity for the Buckley Avenue project and any affordable housing units dedicated to the district by third parties. Is there a mover of that motion? By Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 10, Council, is the consent agenda. So if you have any items on that agenda which present a conflict of interest, or you wish to speak to or debate any of those items, they can be pulled and dealt with separately. Are there any? Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I'd like to speak to the item from Mr. Caldwell regarding the waste disposal under correspondence received for information.
And that is C6.
Yes.
Okay, any further? Councillor Pettengill.
The letters from the students and the Squamish First Nation powwow letter.
Yeah, so the powwow letter is separate. That's after the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry.
And we'll deal with that separately. The students is item C4. Anything further? So is there a mover for the consent agenda? You approved. Councillor French, seconded. Councillor Herpert. Further comment? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So I'll go to those outstanding ones right now. And so first of all, C4, 1106 House on Secondary Social Studies, 11 students, re-elections and community issues. Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I just appreciate all the time the students put into this. I know when we went to the elementary school during the campaign, even the grade 5, 6, I believe it was, students, the questions and the understanding they had was quite strong. I wonder if there's an opportunity, and maybe this is something for council to discuss during our strategic planning, but you know, to have a committee of the whole meeting or something at the high school to involve some of these kids actually in the meeting. In the new year, possibly.
That's a good idea. My suggestion, as a matter of practicality, is to discuss that with the mayor when she returns next month. She would probably initiate the process for that.
That's a concept I certainly support, and it was encouraging for me through the election campaign to see the amount of engagement that was taking place at the schools amongst young people and parents who brought their children to polling places to cast their votes. I think that's really important to have children observe the process and see that it's not onerous and voting is simple. So I thank all the students who engaged themselves, their teachers, and the families that voted together.
And item C6, 1114D, Caldwell re-waste disposal. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, so Mr. Caldwell's letter on composting in Squamish and garden waste disposal makes a number of observations, but the one that I'd like to highlight in particular is his comments on the scheduling for yard waste pickup service. I think it is timely that we give some attention to the circumstance that the letter highlights, that is that November is a high volume month for yard waste, looking for solutions. And not only for leaves, but clippings and so forth. Storage can be difficult. Garbage is where it ends up, or inappropriate dumping sites. And this is a common observation in the last few years. And I wish that, I wonder whether we may refer this to staff for their consideration.
Good idea. And I think the other place that we tend to get into this discussion is during budget.
Yes.
Because there is a budget component to that. So are you moving it be referred to staff?
Yes.
Seconder? Councillor French? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Question? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You went too fast.
Gotta keep up. Councillor French, Councillor Bettencourt.
I concur with Eric. As a homeowner with a rather large yard, this is the time when there's a fair amount of waste being generated out of my yard, and I'd like to be able to put it out of the curb weekly as opposed to every 2 weeks.
When I saw this, I had a question for staff on process. When a letter like this comes in, does staff, just as a matter of course, consider it as part of their sort of work that they're normally doing, or does it require staff or council referring it for staff to pay attention to these sorts of letters?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Reyes. Often when these letters come through in an attempt to respond more quickly than waiting for the agenda, staff will respond to the letter and answer questions. But in terms of taking these suggestions into our work, it requires a council direction to do so.
Further questions? Are you ready? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is a late agenda item, 11-1 Regional District letter. And you were given a copy of that, Council, one of the blue sheets. There it is. Mr. Buxton, Ms. White.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Shannon White. I'm a sustainability coordinator here at the District of Squamish. I'm responsible for everything related to solid waste management within the community. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of, speak on the issue of a proposed letter of support from the District of Squamish for an expression of interest for a funding application by the SLRD. And this is an old PowerPoint, so I'm just going to keep going with this. Apologies for that.
Did I get the wrong one?
No, we must have uploaded the wrong one. That's okay. It's the same information. It's just a little bit. The bullet points were shorter in the other version. It's okay. I'll just go right. It's okay. I will manage the PowerPoint at the same time. So I just want to give a little bit of background. Apologies for the technology issues. So a little bit of background on who Sea to Sky Soils is before I jump into the issue or the expression of interest. So Sea to Sky Soils is an organic processing facility located just outside of Pemberton. They currently accept all of our curbside collection organic material, and they are currently at capacity of their facility. And so that's part of this issue, and in addition with the issue that Harvest Power, which is a composting facility based out of Richmond, recently shut down. So currently the movement of organic material within the Lower Mainland and the Sea Sky Corridor is facing a little bit of shift right now. So that's why this is coming to light. So there is a grant by the provincial government out. Municipalities, regional districts, and First Nations can apply to this, so they can submit an expression of interest, and if they are chosen, then they can apply for the fund. And the fund is for infrastructure projects related to processing of municipal and agricultural organic waste. And so the SLRD, which is the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, under which we have a solid waste management plan, they are intending on submitting an expression of interest in partnership with Sea to Sky Soils. That is, if it is approved by their board. So they are going to be bringing the proposal for this expression of interest to apply for this grant to the board of the SLRD on November 28th. The intent of the funding application is to increase, essentially it is to increase the capacity at Sea to Sky Soils. And through this partnership, the SLRD is seeking to secure guaranteed processing priority for member municipalities. So that's the District of Squamish, Whistler, the Resort Municipality of Whistler, and Pemberton and Lillooet, as well as others. As well as they're looking to seek, they're seeking to secure member municipality specific tipping fees. So currently we are paying one price, but as I mentioned or alluded to with the shift in materials, there is the chance that prices could increase. So the SLRD is looking by applying or by submitting an expression of interest on behalf of Sea to Sky Soils, they would like to ask these two items out of Sea to Sky Soils. How this impact on Squamish is really, it's about securing composting capacity and a price within our corridor. We, as the District of Squamish, we have made every effort to kind of be responsible for the waste and the materials that we are producing through the different activities in the district. And so we have in the past made all efforts to ensure that especially our organic material is kept within the Sea to Sky corridor. And then the second part of this, and apologies again for all the text, is really to accept the increased organic material that we foresee happening with the implementation of the solid waste bylaw. So as we move forward with diverting organic material from all commercial and institutional buildings and properties within Squamish and multifamily homes, there will be increased material coming out of the District of Squamish, and we would prefer, again, to keep that within the corridor. And so this is hopefully what the capacity would be for. And then we have to recommend a motion.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Council Pettengill, Council French, Council Anderson.
I think it's a process question with Councillor Reese and Councillor Stoner as our current reps on the SLRD. I'm wondering why they wouldn't have the authority to just essentially move this on Squamish's behalf, or is this the point of having a stronger voice with the private province?
Well, I can tell you why. We are Squamish's representatives on the regional district board, but we don't have power on this board outside of our position as councillor. So for this board in this District of Squamish to endorse as a corporate entity the initiative of the SLRD takes a resolution of this council. And so the fact that we sit on the board there is almost irrelevant. So we're just part of this board. There's Councillor French and then Councillor Anderson.
My question might be taking us into a set of weeds we don't want to go into, so maybe just high level and quickly. How does the organic waste processing facility at the Callahan fit into this? And then specifically, is that facility at capacity for accepting materials as well?
Thank you. So we do have two organic processing facilities that are approved by the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District Solid Waste Management Plan. And Callahan is one of them, as well as Sea to Sky Soils. Callahan actually is at capacity. They have stopped taking all organic material from the District of Squamish, and I believe also from the Resort Municipality of Whistler. However, I would have to double check that. They largely actually accept biosolids, which they mix with liquid waste on site. And so although it's a composting facility, it's because of the growth of both communities, the amount of biosolids has grown so much that they're at capacity, and so therefore all the food, green waste, organic material has been diverted to Sea to Sky Soils. That's it.
Councillor Anderson.
So I wonder if staff may have some information as to the type of infrastructure Sea to Sky Soils may be considering in an expansion program. Are they increasing simply the scale or capacity of the existing composting facilities and technology, or are they going to try out some new ideas? I ask this because, as has been mentioned, other facilities are at capacity, so on a region-wide basis, we may be looking at new investments for various categories of biomass wastes in this corridor?
Great question. So unfortunately, I cannot speak to what the details of their funding application are and whether they will be expanding using the current technology that they use or whether they'd be investing in new. We haven't gone into that level of detail. As it is a partnership with SLRD in the Sea to Sky Soils, we're just auxiliary in that way thus far.
Further questions? There is a staff recommendation. Heard move that. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Herford. Further comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And correspondence, 12A1, action requested. This is with respect to a Squamish Nation powwow. Let me just find the sheet. And the staff have advised me that we supported this last year to the extent of $1,000. Subject to council comments, my suggestion was going to be, because you'll see in the report, on the very last page of the report actually, of the agenda, there's various categories, and so rather than just picking them out, I was going to suggest that we sponsor to the extent of $675 for junior girls 6 to 12 and $675 for junior boys 6 to 12. But I'm open to other suggestions, certainly, and that to be funded from council contingency. Councillor Penfield, Councillor French. You someone moving?
Sure, I have questions, but I'll move it.
We'll have the questions first.
So just what is our council contingency? And I assume our fiscal year ends December 31st. So how much do we have left? I wonder if staff could speak to why this did or didn't go through the community enhancement grant process.
They probably wouldn't know, but typically, sometimes these things just come in, is the reality of it. And we try to enforce the process, but there are often exceptions. My recollection is that we still have about $20,000 in the council contingency. The only significant thing that might have to come out of that would be snow clearing if our budget was somehow blowing snow clearing, but I don't think it is. So it's not my recollection. So that would be my first choice. Staff has any comment? That's a good guess.
It's a good guess. I'm looking at Linda, we don't know off the top of our heads. Yeah, and then something coming in outside of the grant process, again, it's council discretion to consider.
So is that somebody prepared to move that, Councillor Toner? Councillor French, second. Further discussion or comment? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Yeah, 13. You've approved the minutes.
Yeah, you didn't pull anything out, so you can
No,
move
so it's
past
all
it.
done. So item 13 is done. Business arising from the minutes, was there anything for anybody? None? Committee minutes and reports, and so these were extracted from the minutes to deal with separately. Now the first 15 sub 1 is recommendations from the October 16th Committee of the Whole, Squamish Child Care Needs Assessment and Strategy. Somebody prepared to move that? Councillor French? Your seconder? I'll second it. Comment from council? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Darrell Bay discussion.
Excuse me, can I just request a change in the wording on the motion to make it standalone, to change work on this file to change it to
continue to work on the WLNG license or lease agreement file.
Okay, so the Darrell Bay discussion, staff continue to work on the WLNG lease agreement file, taking into consideration the following, the various points there. I will make the comment that this is in the open. Very often land dispositions and acquisitions are enclosed until we actually confirm the deal. Council brought it out into the open because there was a lot of interest in the community about this. And so while this is intended in the open not to be specific to any particular details, it was intended to show the public that this is more or less what we're talking about and that something is being done on that. The actual contract details, if they get to that point, will probably initially be discussed and closed as per the usual habit. But in the meantime, for the public, we are working on it and staff have been given those instructions. So is there a mover for that? Councillor Herford, seconder. Councillor French. Any further discussion? Councillor Pettengill.
I was at the meeting and I was sure in my recollection there was a few other things discussed. I've sort of debated with myself what to do on this resolution. What I've come to is that I will just support this as is because I wasn't on council at the time. But there are some things that I'm hoping and I assume we will have an opportunity to discuss going forward.
Oh yeah, any arrangement will come back to council, absolutely, for endorsement. Ultimately, we make the decision. Any other questions or comments? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And item 2, recommendations from the October 23rd, 2018 Committee of the Whole. And the first is Truth and Reconciliation and United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Committee of the Whole refer the following calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, calls to action report to the strategic planning session for the 2018-2022 District of Squamish Council. And I'm not going to list them off, but there's looks like about 15 or 20 of them. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Stoner, seconder. Councillor Herford, discussion. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And recommendations from November 7th, 2018 Public Art Select Committee. The first, and we'll deal with them separately, Public Art Proposal Learning Expeditions at Squamish School. The Public Art Select Committee fund the proposal from the Learning Expeditions at Squamish School to the amount of $2,000. The project location be subject to discussion with staff and brought back to committee, back for committee approval. Is there a mover for that? Councillor French, second Councillor Herford. Anybody wish to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Yes, I'm the chair of the committee and just share that we had a great discussion and a presentation from the students that was lengthy and thorough. It was, the committee felt well put together by the students, well thought out. And I think we all pretty much agreed that it's an exciting new project.
Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Second is coordinator support. The Public Art Select Committee allocate $4,800 of their budget for the creation of a public art coordinator part-time temporary position. Is there a mover of that?
Sorry, before you move that, can I just specify that that's meant to be for 2019? Yeah, if you could add the words in 2019 to the after position.
Part-time temporary position in 2019?
Yes.
Was that the motion?
Yes.
That's okay with the seconder?
Thank you.
And was there discussion on that? Councillor Pettengill?
One, does this commit us then to put this in the budget? And two, is this meant to be then a staff position of council or of the district or of this committee or some third party we will, like a not-for-profit that we will give this money to have this position?
I can speak to that if you like, Councillor.
Go ahead.
Yes.
So this position will be partial funding for, if this goes through in the budget, for a position that will be combined with some support for the Constellation Music Festival that we're going to charge back should that all go forward according to plan. And so the money from those two pots will combine to form one position over the course of the summer.
But it would go through the 2019 budget?
In the 2019 budget, and will be a district position.
And so just for information, what happens with those things is we show an out of $4,800 in the budget, an expenditure, but the source of funding would not necessarily be taxation, it would be from some other source. That's the way the budget would deal with that particular item. Any further discussion on that point? Call the question, all in favor?
No, we don't have movers.
Oh, we don't have it, sorry. So mover, Councillor French. Councillor Herford, second, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the third is Creative Crosswalk Valleycliff. That the committee contribute $2,000 towards the stencils for the Creative Crosswalk in Valleycliff. Is there a mover for that? Councillor French, seconded. Councillor Stoner, discussion? Councillor French?
It's my understanding out of discussion in our meeting that this, for all intents and purposes, is money that's already spent. It's just a budget allocation to have this $2,000 come out of this committee's working budget.
Sorry, I'll speak to that as well. Yeah, this has already been invoiced, and it's essentially a transfer from the engineering budget to the public budget.
Okay. Further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 16, council staff in-camera announcements. These are being put in the agenda for information only. You don't have to deal with them. But these are matters that council has resolved to bring out of closed and put into the public domain. And putting them in the agenda does that. And that takes me all the way to unscheduled public attendance. There was none. Open question period, clarification related to agenda items from our media support. All good. And congratulations, by the way. Councillor staff announcements. Any staff announcements? Anything you did that was interesting in the last week or two? Councillor Bettenville.
I'd just like to point out, we did dedicate some money to the powwow. It's this weekend, and I've been a few times. It's pretty incredible, so people can go. Make some time this weekend.
Councillor Herbert.
Over last week, I had the pleasure of attending a couple of staff events. District one was with the fire department, the other was with district staff, and as part of sort of being the new person in a workplace, it was really cool, really good to see the camaraderie and the staff at the various levels receive recognition for their roles, and some of them have been, I think, 20 years was the longest.
25.
Oh, there's some 25s at
the
fire. So, yeah, it was great to see that. I look forward to being a productive member of the team and attending some more events.
Thank you. Anybody else? So I have a bit of a mayor's report, acting mayor's report. First thing was Remembrance Day, November 11th, put on again by the Diamond Head Legion, and I'd like to thank the Legion, and there's also a lot of volunteers there, and the Black Tusk Caledonia Pipe Band, Pipe and Drum Band I think it's called. I think, on a very fundamental basis, there are two types of people in this world, those that love the bagpipes and those that don't like the bagpipes. And I happen to be one of those that loves the bagpipes, and so I have to thank the band. And I went to the Legion afterwards, excuse me, which is a fairly confined space. It's about the size of this room, actually, and they played there. So you really have to love the pipes to stick around. But it was great. Also, I attended Staff Awards Day, as did Councillor Herbert, and I don't know if there's anybody else there. And would like to, again, it's really a worthwhile event where the district acknowledges the years of service of several staff, 2 at 25-year, a couple at 20, several at 10. One of them was actually almost defamed, believe it or not. I was one of them, and received, I'm don't know what I would call it, a missive from the former mayor. So we won't have to go into that too far out. And then there were several at 5. But the staff of the district, do a phenomenal job and from time to time are really called upon to go above and beyond the normal high standard that they set. And so they are very worthy of the awards and recognition that they receive on that. Most recently was the Firefighters Appreciation Dinner, and Councilor Herbert referred to that last Saturday. And once again, we're dealing with staff and some volunteers who provide a huge service to our community, and so it was neat to go there. And they also had years of service awards and recognition awards and awards and several promotions to announce. And so it was a great evening for them. Certainly, we couldn't manage without them. And that is about it. You have nothing? Oh, okay. So I'm looking for, there will not be a motion to close this meeting. So I'm looking for a motion to terminate. Councillor French. Councillor Somers seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.